There's a reason you keep falling into the same emotional traps, and it's not what you think. We tell ourselves it's weakness, or lack of discipline, or maybe even fate, but the truth runs much deeper. The Buddha taught that what binds us to our suffering isn't the anger, the craving, or the fear itself. It's the unconscious patterns, the habit energies, that we carry like invisible chains. And here's the part that's both unsettling and liberating. Those patterns didn't begin with you. They've been passed down for generations, woven into your very being like threads of memory you never chose. Tonight, I'm going to share the discovery that a Vietnamese monk made in the middle of one of the most brutal wars in history. A discovery that changed how we understand why human beings get stuck in cycles of anger, anxiety, and pain, and more importantly, how we can step out of them. What he realized is that every moment of awareness is like striking a bell in the darkness. The sound calls you home, back to the present, back to the freedom that exists beneath all the noise. And as we explore this together, I want you to see how the wisdom of Buddhism isn't abstract or distant. It's alive in your daily life. It's in the way you breathe before speaking, the way you listen instead of react, the way you choose presence over autopilot. Each choice is a path back to your true home, the place where cycles end and peace begins. If these conversations speak to something real in you, something grounded in truth, philosophy, and inner growth, consider subscribing. It's a small gesture, but it helps us reach more minds like yours. And it quietly signals that you're walking this path with intention. There's a quiet kind of suffering most people carry, and it often hides in plain sight. It shows up when you've promised yourself you'll change. Maybe you'll stop overreacting, or you'll quit that destructive habit, or you'll stop replaying the same painful story in your head. But before you know it, you're back in the same place again. The same reaction, the same regret, the same cycle. It feels like running in circles, exhausting yourself without ever reaching a new destination. And it's not because you're weak or broken or hopeless. It's because, as the Buddha taught, we live under the influence of what he called habit energy, the momentum of unconscious patterns that pull us like invisible strings. Think about the last time you lost your temper. Maybe you swore you'd stay calm, you'd breathe, you'd choose peace. But the trigger came, and suddenly your chest was tight, your voice was raised, and before you even realized it, you had spilled words that you couldn't take back. Afterwards, you told yourself, never again. But of course, the cycle repeated. This is the very nature of habit energy. It runs deeper than intention. It's not erased by promises or resolutions. It requires something more radical, awareness. The Buddha once said, "We are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think." But what he meant wasn't just about positive thinking. It was about seeing how repeated patterns create grooves in the mind. Just as a river carves its way deeper into the earth by flowing in the same direction over time, our repeated actions and thoughts carve pathways in consciousness. And if those patterns are fueled by anger, fear, or craving, we end up stuck in ruts that lead us nowhere but deeper suffering. So what can free us? The first step is recognition. Imagine striking a bell in a silent temple. At first, the sound is sharp and clear. Then it fades, leaving an echo that lingers in the air. Our awareness is like that bell. When you notice a negative habit arising, you strike the bell of mindfulness. The sound is the moment of waking up. You realize anger is here, craving is here, fear is here. And in that recognition, something changes. You're no longer inside the habit blindly. You've created a small space, a pause where choice becomes possible. This is why in Zen monasteries the sound of a bell isn't just to mark time. It's a call to return home. The monks stop what they're doing, they breathe, and they come back to the present moment. What if you treated your own triggers the same way? What if instead of rushing headlong into reaction, you saw your irritation, your craving, or your despair as a bell calling you to stop, breathe, and come home? But here's the challenge: we're not just dealing with one lifetime of habits. In many ways, we're carrying the weight of generations. A boy promises he will never be like his father, who shouted in anger when he was hurt. Yet one day, when his sister falls and begins to cry, he feels the same surge of irritation rise up. The same words form on his lips. "How could you be so careless?" In that moment, he realizes the truth. These habits are not only his. They are inherited, passed down through his father and his father's father, a chain of reactivity stretching back through time. This is why Buddhism teaches the concept of continuation. You are not separate from those who came before you. You carry their patterns, their wounds, and also their strengths. And here is the liberating part. When you heal yourself, you are also healing them. When you interrupt the cycle, when you bring compassion where there was once only anger, you free not just your own life, but the countless lives connected to you. Let's pause here. Have you noticed how often you treat your habits as enemies? You call them bad, you shame yourself, you promise to fight harder, but the Buddha never taught us to fight with ourselves. He taught us to understand. Just as a mother doesn't scold a crying baby but holds it gently, we are asked to hold our anger, our fear, our craving with mindfulness, to say, "I see you, I will take care of you." That simple shift from judgment to compassion is revolutionary. Think of your anger like fire. If you panic and try to beat it down with your hands, you'll only get burned. If you feed it wood, it will consume everything. But if you learn to contain it, to watch it, to understand its nature, it will transform into light and warmth. The Buddha said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." When you hold your habit with love, you create the conditions for transformation. Of course, this takes practice. It's not a one-time realization. It's a daily training. This is why mindfulness of breathing, walking meditation, and even drinking tea are considered so powerful in Buddhism. They are not escapes from life. They are laboratories of transformation. When you breathe mindfully, you're not just inhaling air. You are training your nervous system to return to calm, to interrupt the cycle of reactivity. When you walk with awareness, each step becomes an arrival, each footfall a reminder. I am home. When you drink tea in silence, truly tasting, truly present, you are proving to yourself that peace is possible in the simplest of acts. Now, imagine applying this to the very moment a habit arises. The phone rings, and instead of rushing, you breathe 3 times before answering. Craving appears, and instead of grabbing what you want, you pause and ask, "What is this really about?" Anger arises, and instead of exploding, you silently say, "I see you. I will care for you." Each time you do this, you weaken the old groove and create a new one. Over time, the cycle begins to loosen its grip, and here's the paradox. Peace doesn't come from erasing all habits at once. It comes from discovering freedom in a single breath, in a single step, in a single choice. The Buddha reminded us that the mind is everything. What you think, you become. Every small act of awareness is a seed. Every seed watered with mindfulness grows into a tree of peace. But why does it feel so difficult? Because most of us are addicted to movement. Our minds jump from past to future, problem to problem, like restless monkeys. We crave stimulation. We run from silence. We drown ourselves in distractions. Yet the sound of a bell, the metaphorical bell of awareness, offers us the chance to stop. Stopping isn't a weakness. Stopping is the foundation of freedom. When you stop running, you realize you've been home all along. There is a Zen story of a monk who asked his teacher, "Where can I find peace?" The teacher replied, "If you stop looking for it, you will find it." At first, this sounds like a riddle, but it's simple. As long as you're chasing peace as something outside yourself, you will never arrive. When you stop, breathe and rest in this moment, you discover that peace was never missing. It was only hidden beneath layers of habit and forgetfulness. So tonight, As you listen, consider this. Your habits are not life sentences, they are invitations. Every time you fall into anger, it's an invitation to practice compassion. Every time you feel craving, it's an invitation to look deeper at what you truly need. Every time you feel despair, it's an invitation to return to the present moment and discover that even here, even now, there are small miracles to touch. The Buddha once told his disciples, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. It sounds simple, but in practice, it is the hardest work and the most rewarding. Because when you stop dwelling, when you stop dreaming, and you simply arrive, the cycle of negative habits begins to dissolve. You are no longer spinning in circles. You are walking a new path, one mindful step at a time. Most people think breaking habits is about willpower. Push harder, resist longer, punish yourself when you fail. But if willpower alone were enough, we wouldn't be repeating the same cycles year after year. The truth is, the more you fight a habit with force, the more it tightens its grip. What you resist doesn't just persist, it grows stronger. That's why the Buddha taught a different way. He understood that liberation doesn't come through force, but through understanding. Imagine someone drowning in quicksand. The instinct is to thrash, to fight, to claw your way out. But the more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Only when you learn to move gently, carefully, with awareness, do you give yourself the chance to rise. Our habits are the same. The more we thrash against them with anger or shame, the more we sink. But when we approach them with mindfulness, we begin to free ourselves. This is where the practice of mindful breathing becomes so revolutionary. At first, it may seem too simple. How could paying attention to your breath undo years, even generations, of destructive patterns? Yet think about it. Every habit arises in the body. Anxiety shows up as racing breath. Anger shows up as heat in the chest. Craving shows up as restlessness in the hands. By returning to the breath, you return to the source of your patterns. You reconnect body and mind, and in that reconnection, the cycle begins to lose its unconscious power. The Buddha said, "To breathe in, I know I am breathing in. To breathe out, I know I am breathing out." It sounds childlike in its simplicity, but that's the point. Children know how to live in the present. Watch them play. They're not rehearsing old mistakes or imagining future disasters. They're fully alive in what they're doing. To breathe consciously is to relearn that same innocence. But breathing is only the doorway. What matters is how you walk through it. When you take one mindful breath in the middle of a storm of anger, it doesn't erase the anger. It transforms your relationship to it. Instead of being consumed, you become the witness. You see the flames without throwing yourself into them. And when you see clearly, the anger itself begins to change. There is a story of a monk who was once consumed by rage toward another brother in his monastery. Every day, his thoughts burned with resentment. But his teacher told him, "When anger arises, treat it like your only child." The monk was puzzled. How could something so destructive be treated with love? But he followed the advice. Each time the anger rose, he imagined holding it in his arms like a newborn, not judging it, not rejecting it, simply being present with it. Over time, the fire cooled. What had once been pure rage revealed itself to be hurt, and beneath the hurt, a longing for connection. From that insight came forgiveness. This is why Buddhism never teaches suppression. Suppression only buries the habit deeper, where it waits like a seed, ready to sprout again. Mindfulness is not about burying, it is about bringing light. When you shine light on a seed of anger, you see what waters it. You see the conditions that made it grow. And when you understand those conditions, you no longer water them. You create space for other seeds, compassion, patience, joy, to grow instead. But here's a subtle danger. Many people hear these teachings and think mindfulness means passivity, that it means doing nothing. That's not true. To be mindful is not to ignore or deny. It is to act from clarity rather than compulsion. The Buddha himself faced wars, injustice, and conflict in his time. He didn't turn away. He responded with wisdom. He reminded his disciples, if you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your path. Mindfulness is the lamp. It allows you to act without becoming blind in the darkness of habit. Think for a moment about your own life. How many times have you spoken words you didn't mean, only to regret them the moment they left your lips? How many times have you reached for something, food, drink, distraction, not because you truly needed it, but because habit pulled you there? These moments of autopilot steal our lives. We end up living not as free beings, but as puppets of unseen patterns. The Buddha's path is about cutting the strings. One of the most profound examples of this comes from the story of a Vietnamese teacher exiled from his homeland during war. For years, he dreamed of returning to the hills and temples of his childhood. In his dreams, he would see himself climbing the familiar green hill, but each time, just before reaching the top, he would wake up, filled with grief. For decades, this dream haunted him. Until one day, through the practice of mindfulness, he realized, home is not a place, home is presence. He began to breathe with the words, I have arrived, I am home. And the dream stopped. He had broken the cycle of longing and found peace in the present. This discovery is universal. How often do we say, I'll be happy when I get the right job, the right partner, the right house? But this when is an illusion. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of postponement. Each time we reach the goal, another when arises, and so life becomes an endless chase. The Buddha turned this illusion on its head. He said, happiness is not found in the future. It is found in the deep awareness of this moment. You may be thinking, but what if my present moment is filled with pain? And it's true. Life brings suffering. The Buddha's very first teaching was the truth of suffering, but suffering doesn't cancel out peace. They coexist. Even in pain, there are elements of wonder, the breath that still flows, the sunlight that still shines, the heart that still beats. Mindfulness allows you to touch these wonders, even in the midst of struggle. And when you touch them, the cycle of despair loosens. This isn't abstract. Try it. The next time you're anxious, instead of drowning in thought, pause and notice your breath. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice something simple, the way the light falls through the window, the sound of a bird outside. In that moment, you're not erasing your anxiety, but you're not feeding it either. You're reclaiming your freedom. This is how negative habits begin to dissolve. Not with grand gestures, but with small arrivals. Step by step, breath by breath, presence becomes stronger than compulsion. And one day you look back and realize the cycle has weakened. The groove in the mind has softened. A new path has formed. But the Buddha also knew that walking this path alone is difficult. That's why he emphasized the Sangha, the community of practice. Alone, your candle flickers. Together, the light becomes a blaze. In monasteries, bells are rung not just for one person, but for everyone. When one stops to breathe, all stop. The collective energy carries you. Even outside a monastery, you can create your own Sangha. Surround yourself with people who value presence, who remind you of your better self. Each time they choose mindfulness, they water that seed in you as well. There's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Ending the cycle of negative habits is not about speed, it's about depth, endurance and compassion, and we need each other for that. Still, even with community, the real work happens inside. The Buddha compared the mind to a garden. In it are all kinds of seeds: anger, joy, fear, compassion. Which seeds grow depends on what you water. Every thought, every action, every word is like rain. If you constantly water anger, anger grows. If you water compassion, compassion blossoms. Mindfulness is the gardener's awareness. It allows you to choose where to pour your attention. Think about how you use your attention. Do you feed it constantly with news that stokes fear, with conversations that breed gossip, with distractions that keep you restless? Or do you feed it with silence, with gratitude, with acts of kindness? Your habits are not accidents. They are the harvest of what you water daily. The good news is, the cycle can be broken at any point. Even one mindful breath interrupts years of unconscious pattern. Even one act of compassion begins to heal generations of hurt. And when you realize this, hope returns. Because no matter how long you've been trapped, freedom is always one breath away. The Buddha said that there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. This means you don't have to wait until you are perfect, until your habits are gone, until your life looks a certain way. You walk the path now. You live the freedom now. And in doing so, the cycle begins to dissolve. There's a moment everyone knows but few admit. It's the moment you catch yourself repeating the very thing you swore you'd never do. You feel the anger rising, your words spilling faster than your awareness can catch them, and suddenly you see your parent, your teacher, your past self, living through you. And it hurts, not just because of what you said or did, but because it feels as if the past has you in its grip. This is why the Buddha spoke so often about habit energy. Not because it was some abstract doctrine, but because he knew this is the invisible prison that keeps humanity repeating the same suffering. Habit energy doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it shows up as that restless scroll through your phone at midnight, knowing you should be sleeping. Sometimes it's the way you shrink yourself in conversations, telling yourself your voice doesn't matter. Sometimes it's the craving for more possessions, more approval, more recognition, no matter how much you already have. Each of these is a thread, and together they weave the fabric of our daily lives. But here's the good news. The fabric is not fixed. It can be rewoven. The Buddha said, "Each morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters most." This isn't just poetry. It's a reminder that no matter how deep the groove of habit may be, every moment is an opportunity to lay down a new groove. Still, most of us don't believe this. We think change must be dramatic, overnight, absolute. But Buddhism teaches the opposite. It's the small shifts, the gentle arrivals, the pauses that accumulate into transformation. Like drops of water wearing down stone, each mindful moment changes the shape of your life. Let me share a story. A young boy once came to a monastery each summer with his younger sister. He loved the peace of the temple grounds, the quiet of the gardens, the chants in the meditation hall. But he carried a secret vow inside him. At home, his father often responded to his pain with anger. If he scraped his knee, his father scolded him for being careless instead of comforting him. The boy promised himself, "When I grow up, I'll never be like him. If I have children, I'll respond with love, not irritation." One summer at the monastery, his sister was playing with another child on a hammock. They were laughing, swinging, until suddenly one of the girls fell and cut herself badly. Blood, tears, panic. And in that instant the boy felt it, an overwhelming surge of anger rising in his chest. The very same words he had heard so many times leapt to his tongue. "Stupid! How could you do that?" He caught himself just in time, stunned. He realized with horror that the same energy lived in him. His promise alone was not enough. Habit energy had been passed down like a seed planted deep in his consciousness. What saved him was the practice of mindfulness he had learned at the monastery. Instead of exploding, he walked slowly, breathing deeply, practicing the art of stopping. And with each step, clarity grew. He saw that his father wasn't a monster. He too had inherited this pattern, and his father's father before him. This anger had flowed through generations, like a river too strong to resist. But now, in this moment of awareness, the boy had a choice. He could either continue the flow or redirect it. That day, with his breath as his anchor, he began the work of ending the cycle. This is the radical power of mindfulness. It doesn't erase the seeds in your consciousness. The seeds of anger, fear, craving remain. But it gives you the power to choose which seeds you water. Buddhism teaches that in the storehouse of our mind, all seeds exist. Compassion beside anger, joy beside despair, wisdom beside ignorance. Which one grows depends on where you place your attention. So ask yourself, what are you watering today? Every complaint, every negative thought, every indulgence in craving, it waters certain seeds. Every breath of gratitude, every act of kindness, every pause before reacting, it waters others. Over time, the garden of your mind becomes the reflection of your daily watering. And here's the subtle truth. Habits are not destroyed, they are transformed. Your anger, when held with understanding, can become clarity about what matters most. Your craving, when seen clearly, can become insight into what you're really longing for: connection, purpose, belonging. Your fear, when embraced, can become courage. The energy doesn't vanish, it changes form. The Buddha once explained it like this: just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed our past again and again. But the snake doesn't destroy itself. It doesn't kill the skin in hatred. It simply outgrows it. That's how transformation happens, not through war with yourself, but through growth, through outgrowing what no longer serves you. Now let's bring this closer to your own life. Think of a habit that has followed you for years. Maybe it's losing your temper. Maybe it's doubting yourself. Maybe it's numbing your emotions with distraction. Instead of promising yourself you'll never do it again, what if you saw it as a teacher? Each time it arises, it's calling you to practice. Each time you stumble, it's a reminder to breathe. This is not failure, it's training. And every round of training makes you stronger, wiser, freer. There's another Zen story of a monk who asked his teacher, "How long will it take me to be free of anger if I practice diligently every day?" The teacher replied, 10 years. The monk protested, 10 years? What if I work twice as hard? The teacher answered, then 20 years. Confused, the monk asked, why longer? The teacher smiled and said, because when you hurry, you water the seed of impatience. Freedom doesn't grow in that soil. This is the paradox of Buddhist practice. The more you grasp at change, the further it slips. The more gently you walk, the more naturally transformation arrives. Like a flower opening, you can't force it. You can only create the right conditions, and those conditions are available right now. The next time anger arises, breathe and say softly, "Hello, anger, I see you." The next time craving appears, breathe and whisper, "Hello, craving, I know you're here." The next time fear trembles in your chest, breathe and comfort it as you would a child. "It's okay, I'm here with you." In doing this, you're not just surviving the habit, you're reshaping your consciousness. The Buddha's wisdom shines here. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Your freedom isn't waiting in some distant future when you've finally perfected yourself. It's available in the way you meet this very moment. And yet, habits don't only live inside us, they live between us. How many conflicts in families, friendships, or societies come from the recycling of old patterns? One person reacts with anger, the other retaliates, and the cycle escalates. Nations fall into war the same way individuals fall into fights, through habit energy. This is why the Buddha insisted on compassion as the foundation of any lasting peace. Not sentimentality, but the courage to break the cycle, to refuse to return hate with hate. This doesn't mean you let others walk over you. It means you respond with clarity instead of compulsion. You set boundaries with wisdom, not with revenge. You speak the truth firmly, but without poisoning your words with hatred. This is harder than it sounds, which is why so few choose it. But when you do, you plant a flag for peace in a world addicted to conflict. Look at history. Some of the most powerful transformations didn't come from armies or weapons, but from people who broke the cycle of hatred. A monk sitting calmly in flames, offering his body as a message of love. A leader walking with thousands in silence rather than striking back with violence. These moments shake the world not because they are loud, but because they reveal another possibility. And you don't need to be a monk or a leader to embody this. Every time you stop a fight before it begins, every time you choose listening over shouting, every time you pause before sending that angry message, you're breaking the cycle. You're proving to yourself and to others that peace is possible even here, even now. In this way, Buddhist teachings are not abstract philosophy. They are daily medicine. Medicine for the mind poisoned by anger. Medicine for the heart restless with craving. Medicine for the spirit caught in fear. The cure isn't outside you. It's in the breath, the pause, the choice you make in the heat of the moment. So the question becomes, what will you choose next time? Will you feed the cycle, or will you let the bell of mindfulness call you home? Each choice matters, because each choice is a thread in the fabric of your life, and the fabric you weave becomes the home you live in. There's a kind of hunger that no meal can satisfy. You know it, that subtle itch, that restless pull toward just one more scroll, one more purchase, one more compliment, one more drink, one more chance to prove yourself. And the moment you get it, the satisfaction slips like sand through your fingers. That's because what you're chasing isn't the thing itself. It's the feeling behind the thing. You want safety, recognition, love, belonging. But craving tricks the mind into thinking it lives outside of you. The Buddha saw this clearly. He called it tanha, thirst. Not the natural desire for food when hungry or rest when tired, but the endless grasping at more, the thirst that never ends. This thirst is the engine of suffering, and yet it's so ordinary we hardly notice it. It's in the way you check your phone without thinking, the way you replay a compliment for days, the way you measure yourself against others' lives. Each is a sip from salt water, tempting, but the more you drink, the thirstier you become. But why does craving have such power? Because it ties itself to identity. It whispers, if you get this, you'll finally be enough. If you lose this, you'll be nothing. That's why rejection cuts so deep, why failure feels fatal, why even small losses can feel unbearable. Craving is never about the object, it's about the story you've wrapped around it. The Buddha's wisdom here was radical. He didn't say, destroy all desire. That's a common misunderstanding. He said, understand it. To see desire for what it is, a movement of the mind, not the truth of who you are. Once you see it clearly, it loosens its grip. There's a Zen story of a monk who asked his teacher, Master, what is the greatest obstacle to enlightenment? The teacher replied, attachment. The monk asked, and what is attachment? The teacher said, it is the belief that this moment is not enough. Think about that. How many times have you overlooked the present because you were reaching for the next thing? You finish your meal but already plan dessert. You achieve one goal and immediately set another. You receive love but still worry if it will last. The cycle is endless because craving feeds on tomorrow, never today. And yet the present is all that ever exists. The Buddha said, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. He wasn't denying ambition or planning. He was showing that when you're rooted in now, craving loses its fuel. But here's the subtle trap. Craving often disguises itself as virtue. You tell yourself, I just want to improve. But if that improvement comes from a place of not enough, it will never end. You say, I just want love. But if that love comes from fear of being alone, it will always feel unstable. You strive for success, but if success is tied to your worth, it will never satisfy. So how do you break free? By shifting the soil where craving grows. When you cultivate contentment, gratitude, and presence, craving withers, not because you forced it away, but because you saw through its illusion. The Buddha compared this to a fire. Craving is like a flame consuming wood. It burns and burns until the fuel runs out, but the flame itself has no substance. Once you stop feeding it, it dies naturally. Let me tell you a story. A wealthy man once came to the Buddha complaining of his endless anxiety. I have wealth, property, servants, and family, he said, but still I feel restless. I always want more, and the more I gain, the more fearful I become of losing it. The Buddha listened and then asked, "If you had only half of what you possess, would your anxiety be less?" The man shook his head. "No, it would be worse." The Buddha smiled gently. "Then your suffering is not caused by what you have, but by the grasping in your heart." This teaching is timeless. Modern life may look different, but the grasping is the same. You might not be hoarding gold, but maybe you're hoarding attention, validation, or digital likes. And the more you cling, the more restless you become. So the practice is simple, though not easy. Notice when craving arises. Don't judge it, just see it. Say to yourself, "Ah, thirst is here." Then pause, breathe, ask, "What am I really longing for?" Often you'll find the answer is not the thing itself, it's peace, safety, connection. And those are already available in the present moment. One of my teachers once said, "Every craving is a disguised prayer for presence." Think about that. Beneath every restless reach is the desire to feel whole, but wholeness can't be bought, stolen, or forced. It can only be remembered, and yet, let's be honest, craving doesn't vanish just because we understand it once. It returns again and again, like waves on the shore. This is why the Buddha emphasized practice, not perfection. You don't need to conquer every wave, you need to learn how to surf. Each time craving rises, it's another chance to practice balance. Each stumble is another lesson. The mind may protest, but if I let go of craving, won't I lose ambition, passion, drive? This is where Buddhism offers a subtle distinction. There's a difference between craving and aspiration. Craving comes from fear and lack. Aspiration comes from wisdom and love. Craving says, "If I don't get this, I'll be nothing." Aspiration says, "I will grow, not because I'm broken, but because life is unfolding through me." This is why the Buddha didn't reject desire altogether. He encouraged wholesome desires, the aspiration to awaken, the longing to be compassionate, the wish to help others. These are not chains, they are wings. So what does this mean for you, here and now? It means you don't need to kill your ambition, silence your passion, or live without goals. You simply need to look deeply and ask, does this desire come from fear or from love? Does it bind me tighter or does it free me? If you practice this inquiry, your relationship with desire changes. Success no longer defines you, love no longer enslaves you, possessions no longer possess you. You engage with life fully, but without clinging. You can enjoy what comes and release what goes. That is freedom, and that freedom is not distant. It can begin right here. Take a breath. Feel it fully. In this breath, nothing is missing. At this moment, you are already whole. Fear has a way of disguising itself as wisdom. It whispers, "Be careful, prepare for the worst, hold on tightly." At first, it seems like protection, but if you look closely, fear is rarely about the present. It's almost always about what might happen. Anxiety is fear rehearsing 1,000 futures that never arrive. And the tragedy is, while you live in those imagined futures, you miss the only moment that ever truly belongs to you, the now. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught that fear arises when the mind clings to permanence in a world of impermanence. We want guarantees, safety in relationships, certainty in careers, lasting health, unchanging love. But life refuses to give guarantees. Everything is in motion. Every breath, every season, every heartbeat is proof that change is the only constant. Fear is born the moment we resist this truth. Think about it. How much of your worry is really about control? You fear losing what you love, or not getting what you desire, or being unable to handle what's ahead. And yet, the Buddha reminded us, the root of suffering is attachment. Fear grows where attachment grows. The more tightly we cling, the more fragile we feel. There's a Zen parable about a man chased by a tiger. Running for his life, he falls off a cliff and manages to grab a vine. Above him, the tiger snarls. Below him, another tiger waits. And as he hangs there, a mouse begins gnawing at the vine. In that moment, the man notices a strawberry growing beside him. He plucks it, eats it, and smiles. That story has survived for centuries because it holds a profound truth. Life will always have tigers. There will always be uncertainty. But joy is never found in eliminating every threat. It's found in tasting the strawberry that exists right now. Fear shrinks when presence expands, but let's be honest, fear isn't easy to dissolve. It grips the body, tightening the chest, quickening the pulse, narrowing the mind. It convinces you that you must act, must fix, must control. That's why the Buddha didn't simply say, "Do not fear." He offered practices to transform it. One of the simplest yet most powerful is mindful breathing. He said, "Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile." It sounds almost too simple, but try it the next time fear rises. The body listens, the mind follows. Slowly, the storm softens. Psychologists today echo this wisdom. They explain that fear triggers the fight or flight response, flooding the nervous system. But mindful breathing activates the parasympathetic system, the body's natural calming mechanism. In other words, the Buddha's teachings align with what modern science is only now confirming. Presence heals. Still, the question remains, why does fear return again and again? Because the mind confuses control with safety. You think, if I can just plan enough, predict enough, protect enough, then I'll finally feel secure. But has that ever truly worked? No matter how much you prepare, life always surprises you. The tighter you hold, the more exhausted you become. Here lies the deeper invitation of Buddhism to replace the illusion of control with the strength of trust. Not blind trust, but a trust born from wisdom, the wisdom that you are not separate from life. That just as the river carries the leaf, life will carry you. You may not know what's around the bend, but you can know this. You are capable of meeting it when it comes. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "People have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar." How true that is. We stay in situations that hurt us because at least they're predictable. We repeat habits that harm us because at least they're known. Fear of uncertainty becomes a prison. But when you see clearly that life itself is uncertain, you realize the prison was never locked. Think about standing on the shore watching waves crash. If you fight the waves, they overwhelm you. If you try to stop them, you drown. But if you learn to float, to move with them, suddenly the sea becomes not a threat but a rhythm. This is how fear is transformed, not by stopping the waves, but by learning to trust your ability to float. So how can you begin to practice this trust? Start small. Notice the little fears. Fear of judgment, fear of mistakes, fear of silence. When they arise, pause and breathe. Remind yourself, this is impermanent. This too will pass. And then take one step anyway. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's walking with fear in your hand but not in your heart. There's another teaching from the Buddha. A man is not called wise because he talks and talks again, but if he is peaceful, loving, and fearless, then he is in truth called wise. Fearlessness here doesn't mean recklessness. It means a heart so steady, so rooted in presence that fear loses its power. But here's the beauty. You don't need to wait for some perfect moment to cultivate this steadiness. Every fearful thought is an invitation to practice. Every anxious breath is an opportunity to return home. Fear in this way becomes not an enemy but a teacher. So the next time your mind begins rehearsing worst-case scenarios, ask yourself, am I in danger right now, or is it just my mind telling stories? Most often, the present moment is safe. The fear lives in imagination, not in reality. And once you see that, you can smile at fear like you'd smile at a passing cloud. Imagine living that way, not without fear but free from its chains. Imagine walking through life knowing you don't need certainty to be at peace. That is the freedom the Buddha offered. Not a life without storms, but a mind that remains calm in their midst. And when you taste even a glimpse of this freedom, you realize something extraordinary. You don't need to conquer the world to feel safe. You don't need to predict tomorrow to rest tonight. All you need is this breath, this moment, this awareness. In that space, fear dissolves and peace is revealed. Anger is one of the most deceptive emotions we face. It arrives quickly, burns hot, and convinces us that it is power. In the moment, it feels like fire in your chest, a force that could move mountains. But afterward, when the fire dies, what is left? Ash, regret, broken words that can't be taken back, relationships strained, peace disturbed. The Buddha once said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." If you think about it, most anger is not about the present moment. It's about accumulated pain. A harsh word triggers not just itself, but every similar word you've ever endured. A betrayal stings not only for what happened now, but for all the betrayals still living in memory. That's why anger feels disproportionate, because it is. It's history disguising itself as now. But here's the trap. Anger feeds on repetition. The more you replay the moment, the more power it gathers. The story loops in your head. What they said, what you wish you had said, what you'll say next time. And in that loop, anger becomes a habit. A well-worn path the mind walks automatically. That's why it feels so hard to escape, because the habit is strong. Buddhism teaches that anger is not evil, but misunderstood energy. It is a signal. Beneath every outburst lies something tender: fear, sadness, disappointment, hurt. Anger is often the bodyguard for pain. It shouts so no one sees the wound. When you understand this, anger becomes less of an enemy and more of a messenger. There's a story of a monk who was insulted by a villager. The monk remained calm, offering no anger in return. Later, a student asked, "Master, were you not hurt by his words?" The monk smiled and said, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse it, who then owns the gift?" This is the essence of Buddhist wisdom. Insults, like gifts, only belong to you if you accept them. But of course, in practice, anger doesn't dissolve so easily. The mind wants revenge, the body wants release. This is why the Buddha offered concrete tools to work with anger. One of the most powerful is compassion, not in a sentimental sense, but in a practical one. When you see the suffering of the other, your own anger softens. You realize their harsh words were born of their pain, their actions shaped by their ignorance. This doesn't excuse them, but it explains them, and explanation breeds understanding. Thich Nhat Hanh taught, when another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself, and his suffering is spilling over. He does not need punishment, he needs help. That perspective transforms everything. Instead of throwing back the fire, you choose to pour water. But how do you reach that space when you are burning inside? Start with the body. When anger rises, breathe deeply. Feel the heat in your chest. Notice your fists tightening, your jaw clenching. Instead of reacting, sit with it, give it room. Thich Nhat Hanh called this embracing your anger like a crying baby. You don't ignore it, and you don't let it control you. You hold it gently until it calms. Psychology supports this wisdom. Studies show that when people vent their anger by shouting, hitting objects, or unleashing rage, it actually strengthens the habit, making anger more likely in the future. But when people observe their anger mindfully, it loses intensity. Modern science is only echoing what the Buddha knew 2,500 years ago. Awareness disarms anger. Now, some might ask, if I don't express anger, won't I just be suppressing it? Suppression and mindfulness are not the same. Suppression pushes anger down. Mindfulness brings it into the light. One denies, the other understands. When you see anger clearly, it begins to dissolve on its own. Think of anger like a storm. If you fight it, it rages harder. If you suppress it, it floods underground. But if you sit quietly, watching the clouds pass, the storm loses power. You realize it was never permanent, it was just weather. But here's where the cycle becomes vicious. Anger often creates more of itself. You lash out, then regret it. The regret becomes self-anger. That self-anger festers, waiting for the next trigger. And so the cycle repeats. Breaking it requires courage, the courage to stop mid-pattern, to breathe instead of lash, to understand instead of react. Each pause is a victory. Each moment of restraint plants a seed of peace. There's another story of the Buddha encountering a man who cursed him publicly. The Buddha listened quietly, and when the man finished, he asked, "If a man brings a gift to your house, and you refuse to accept it, to whom does it belong?" The man replied, "To the one who offered it." The Buddha said, "So it is with your anger. I do not accept it, so it remains with you." Imagine living that way, not rejecting anger, but simply not letting it stick. And yet there are times when anger feels righteous. When you see injustice, cruelty, harm, shouldn't anger arise? The Buddha never denied this, but he urged us to transform anger into compassion-driven action. Righteous anger is only useful when it leads to wise response, not blind reaction. True strength is not in shouting louder, but in acting clearer. This is why anger can become a path to compassion. When you understand your own anger, you become more patient with the anger of others. When you see your own wounds, you recognize the wounds behind their words, and in that recognition, compassion grows. So what does this mean for your daily life? It means that the next time anger arises, at a colleague, a partner, a stranger on the road, you pause, you breathe, you ask, what pain is hiding here? Sometimes the answer is your own, sometimes it's theirs. Either way, the recognition turns the fire into light. The Buddha said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." It's not poetry, it's survival. Anger multiplied never ends suffering. Only compassion interrupts the cycle. Imagine carrying this into your day. Someone insults you, you don't accept the gift. Someone lashes out, you see their suffering. You breathe, you pause, you respond with clarity. Slowly, anger loses its grip. Slowly, peace takes its place, and when peace guides your actions, even conflict becomes a teacher. This is the transformation Buddhism offers, not to suppress your anger, not to indulge it, but to understand it so deeply that it no longer controls you. Anger becomes not fire, but fuel, energy redirected toward wisdom and compassion. One of the deepest traps the Buddha pointed to is the illusion of a solid, permanent self. At first, that may sound strange. After all, you probably feel certain that you are you. You have a name, a history, a body, memories that belong only to you. But if you look closely, the sense of self is less solid than it seems, and much of our suffering comes from clinging to this fragile construction. Think about how often anger, fear, or pride begin with I. They disrespected me. I deserve better. Why is this happening to me? The ego is constantly whispering stories about ownership and identity, but the Buddha reminded us what we call the self is really just a collection of changing parts. Body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness, each is impermanent. Together they create the illusion of me, but none of them, individually or collectively, can be grasped as a permanent core. This teaching is called anatta, or no self. At first it can sound unsettling. If there's no permanent self, then who am I? But rather than stripping meaning away, this insight frees you. Because if there is no fixed self, then you don't have to be trapped by old identities. You don't have to keep living out the same habits just because you think, that's who I am. Consider how often people use identity to reinforce negative cycles. Someone says, I'm just an angry person. Another says, I'm always anxious. Another, I can never change. This is just me. These beliefs become cages. The ego wants consistency, even if that consistency means suffering. The Buddha showed us that when you loosen the grip on identity, transformation becomes possible. You realize, I am not anger, I am simply experiencing anger. I am not anxious, I am experiencing anxiety. With that shift, space opens. You are no longer fused with the habit. There's a Zen story of a master who told his students to imagine life as a house. Most people believe they own the house, the self. They cling to it, decorate it, defend it. But the wise one realizes the house is only a temporary inn. Guests, thoughts, emotions, sensations come and go. The house itself is built of impermanent materials. To cling to it as me is to guarantee suffering. But what about pride? The ego doesn't just cling to pain, it also clings to praise. Think about the times you felt high on compliments, recognition, success. It feels wonderful, but notice how fragile it is. The moment the recognition fades, the ego panics. You want more, and so begins the cycle of chasing validation. The Buddha warned of this trap. When your happiness depends on identity and reputation, you'll forever be at the mercy of others. Modern psychology echoes this. The idea of the ego identity is central to how we experience ourselves. When people tie their worth to their roles, parent, worker, achiever, they become vulnerable. Lose the role and you lose yourself. This is why midlife crises, job loss, or even aging feel so devastating. The illusion of I has cracked, and we scramble to patch it back together. But Buddhism offers a radical alternative. Instead of patching the self, dissolve the illusion, not to become nothing, but to see clearly. You are not a fixed entity, you are a process, a flow, a series of conditions interacting. The Buddha compared it to a flame. The flame exists, but only because of fuel, oxygen, and spark. Remove one, and the flame vanishes. Was it ever an independent thing, or was it always just conditions coming together? When you see yourself in this way, something shifts. You become less defensive. Criticism doesn't cut so deeply because it's not striking a permanent me. Praise doesn't intoxicate because it's not inflating a fixed me. You realize both are just passing breezes, and in this freedom, peace grows. But the ego resists. It fears disappearance. It whispers, if there's no self, then nothing matters. Yet the Buddha showed the opposite. When the illusion of self softens, compassion expands. Because if you are not separate, then others' pain is not separate either. Their joy becomes your joy. Their suffering becomes your responsibility. In this way, letting go of self creates not emptiness but fullness, an interconnection with all life. The Dalai Lama once said, "The more we care for the happiness of others, the greater is our own sense of well-being." Why? Because the boundary between self and other is thinner than we believe. What you give returns, what you withhold shrinks you. So how do you practice loosening the self? Start by noticing the language of I. Each time you catch yourself saying, I am this, I am that, pause. Ask, is this identity fixed, or is it just a passing state? Instead of I am angry, try there is anger here. Instead of I am anxious, try anxiety is present. That simple shift of language creates space between you and the habit. Meditation also helps. When you sit quietly and observe thoughts, you begin to see how they arise and pass without your control. One moment you're replaying a memory, the next moment you're planning dinner. Where did those thoughts come from? Where did they go? If you were your thoughts, you would vanish each time they vanished, but you don't. So perhaps you are not the thoughts themselves, but the awareness that notices them. Ego-driven habits are sticky. They say, defend yourself, prove yourself, compare yourself. But each time you resist the pull, you weaken the cycle. Each time you rest in awareness instead of identity, you step closer to liberation. Imagine carrying this into daily life. Someone insults you, and instead of flaring up, you think, the ego wants to protect itself. You smile at the pattern instead of being swallowed by it. Someone praises you, and instead of becoming intoxicated, you enjoy it, but let it pass. You live lighter, freer, less burdened. This is not about erasing individuality. You still have preferences, talents, roles, but you no longer mistake them for your essence. You wear them like clothes, useful, beautiful even, but not your skin. And because they are not your skin, you can change them without fear. The Buddha said, "All conditioned things are impermanent." When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. The self is the most conditioned thing of all. When you see its impermanence, you stop clinging. And when you stop clinging, the vicious cycle of ego-driven habits begins to unravel. Desire is a strange force. It begins as a spark, an image, a taste, a longing. For a moment it feels harmless. In fact, it feels exciting. The new job, the perfect partner, the latest purchase, the imagined future. Desire promises, if you get this, you'll finally be at peace. But the truth is, desire rarely ends with fulfillment. More often, fulfillment is the beginning of another craving. The Buddha described this cycle as tanha, thirst. He taught that thirst lies at the very heart of suffering. It's not just thirst for water or food, but thirst for pleasure, recognition, existence itself. The problem isn't that we have needs or preferences. The problem is when desire becomes endless, when the mind believes happiness lies just beyond the next achievement, the next purchase, the next high. Think about how many times you've thought, if I just get this one thing, then I'll be happy. And maybe for a moment you were. But soon enough, the satisfaction faded, replaced by another desire. This is why the Buddha compared desire to drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. There's a Zen story of a monk who was obsessed with collecting beautiful things. He believed that surrounding himself with beauty would bring him peace. His teacher noticed his restlessness and said, "Every object you collect is like another stone in your robe. The more you carry, the heavier you become. Do you want to walk freely, or do you want to sink?" The monk realized that what he thought would free him was actually weighing him down. This is the truth about craving. It pretends to liberate, but actually enslaves. You chase one desire, then another, until life becomes an endless treadmill. Pleasure fades, objects break, relationships change, achievements lose their shine, and so the cycle spins. Modern psychology has a name for this, the hedonic treadmill. Researchers have found that people quickly return to a baseline of happiness after gains or losses. Win the lottery, and within months, your happiness settles back to its usual level. Face a setback, and in time you adjust. The mind craves constant novelty, but novelty never lasts. The Buddha understood this 2,500 years ago. But here's the subtle danger. Craving doesn't only apply to pleasures, it also applies to identity and even spirituality. You can crave being seen as good, crave enlightenment, crave the perfect meditation experience. The Buddha warned that even attachment to spiritual progress can become a trap. As long as the mind is saying, "I'll be happy when," peace is always postponed. So what's the alternative? The Buddha didn't teach repression. He didn't say, "Kill desire." Instead, he offered the middle way. Not indulgence, not denial, but balance. To enjoy life's gifts without clinging to them. To meet desires with awareness, asking, will this lead to lasting peace or just another chain? Think of desire like a fire. A small fire warms the house. Too much fire burns it down. The practice is not to extinguish all fire, but to tend it wisely. Enjoy a meal, but don't believe it will erase emptiness forever. Love someone deeply, but don't cling as if they will never change. Work hard for a goal, but don't tie your worth to its outcome. This balance is the heart of freedom. There's a teaching in the Dhammapada, from craving springs grief, from craving springs fear. For him who is wholly free from craving, there is no grief, whence fear. Notice the link. The moment you crave, you fear. Fear of losing, fear of not getting, fear of impermanence. Release the craving, and the fear softens too. But how do we begin to loosen desire's grip in daily life? Start by observing the moment desire arises. Notice the sensation. It's often a tightening, a leaning forward, a restless energy. Instead of rushing to satisfy it, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, if I don't get this, can I still be at peace? If the answer is yes, you are free. If the answer is no, then the desire has become attachment. Another practice is gratitude. When you focus on what is already here, the endless chase slows down. Gratitude interrupts the story that happiness lies elsewhere. It roots you in the present, where peace is always available. And here's the paradox. When you stop clinging, pleasures actually become sweeter. The taste of tea is richer when you're not desperate for it. The beauty of a sunset is more vivid when you're not trying to capture it. Love is deeper when you're not clutching it in fear. By letting go, you don't lose, you gain the ability to experience fully. Yet the mind will resist. It will whisper, but if I stop chasing, I'll fall behind. I'll miss out. This is the illusion of craving. It convinces you that life is happening somewhere else. But the Buddha reminds us, life is only ever happening here. Imagine stepping off the treadmill, no longer running for the next thing, no longer enslaved by thirst. You still move, still live, still enjoy, but you walk with ease instead of running with desperation. This is the freedom of the middle way, not empty, not deprived, but balanced, steady, at peace. So the next time you feel that restless tug of desire, pause and smile. Recognize it for what it is, a habit of the mind, and then choose differently. You don't have to keep feeding the fire until it burns you out. You can tend it gently, wisely, with awareness. And in that awareness, you'll find a peace that no possession, no achievement, no craving can ever give. A peace that doesn't fade, because it was never dependent on conditions to begin with. The mind can be your greatest ally, or your fiercest prison guard. Left unchecked, it runs wild, jumping from one thought to another, replaying the past, predicting the future, inventing scenarios that may never exist. The Buddha described this restless quality as the monkey mind. Like a monkey swinging from branch to branch, the mind leaps from idea to idea, never satisfied, never still. At first we hardly noticed it. We mistake this constant chatter for life itself. But look closely. How many of your thoughts today were truly necessary? How many brought clarity, and how many brought confusion? Overthinking often feels like solving a problem, yet most of the time it multiplies the problem. You end up exhausted, not enlightened. There's a Zen story about a student who came to a master saying, "My mind is restless. It won't stop running in circles." The master handed him a glass of muddy water. "Let it sit," the master said. "Watch." Slowly the dirt settled, the water cleared on its own. "Your mind is the same," the master explained. "If you stop stirring it, clarity returns." This is the nature of overthinking. The more you stir, the murkier it becomes. But we are addicted to stirring. We think, if I keep turning this over in my head, I'll finally find the answer. Yet the answers we seek rarely arise in the storm. They appear when the waters are still. Modern psychology supports this. Neuroscience has shown that the brain's default mode network is active when we're lost in thought, wandering aimlessly. While it can be useful for creativity, too much of it is linked to anxiety, depression, and rumination. The Buddha understood this long before science had the tools to measure it. He taught that freedom begins with mastering the restless mind. But why does the mind resist stillness? Because I'm afraid. Silence feels like emptiness, and the ego fears emptiness. The mind would rather spin in circles than face the possibility of nothing to grasp. That's why meditation, though simple, can feel so difficult at first. The moment you sit in silence, the monkey mind panics. It throws thought after thought at you, anything to avoid stillness. The Buddha's response was not to fight these thoughts, but to observe them. This is the heart of vipassana meditation, to see things as they truly are. Thoughts arise, you notice them. They pass, you let them go. No judgment, no clinging, no resistance. Over time, this practice reveals the truth. Thoughts are not commands. They are just clouds drifting through the sky of awareness. Imagine sitting under a tree, watching clouds pass overhead. Some are light and fluffy, others are dark and heavy. Some move quickly, others linger. But none of them belong to you. None of them define you. That's the shift meditation brings. The monkey mind doesn't disappear, but it loses its power to control you. There's a saying in Buddhism, you cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. The waves are thoughts, the surfing is awareness. You don't need to silence the mind completely to find peace. You only need to stop drowning in it. But notice how overthinking ties into the cycle of habits. The anxious thought says, "What if I fail?" The mind reacts with fear. To escape, you distract yourself, or you grasp for comfort. That comfort becomes a habit, overeating, scrolling endlessly, chasing validation. Soon, the thought returns and the cycle repeats. The monkey mind doesn't just exhaust you, it drives behavior. By calming it, you break the chain at its root. How do we calm the monkey mind in daily life? Start small. When a wave of thoughts comes, pause and breathe. Feel the breath entering and leaving. This anchors you in the present, where the monkey has less power. Another practice is labeling. When you notice overthinking, say gently, thinking. Not with anger, but with kindness. By naming the process, you create distance. Even everyday rituals can help. Drinking tea slowly, walking mindfully, listening deeply. These are forms of meditation. Each time you bring attention back to the moment, you train the monkey to rest. It won't happen overnight, but like a wild animal gradually tamed, the mind learns stillness through patience and gentleness. Over time, something extraordinary happens. Stillness deepens. You discover that beneath the monkey's chatter lies a vast, quiet space, a clarity that doesn't depend on solving or controlling. This is the mind the Buddha spoke of, the mind like a still lake, reflecting everything clearly without distortion. And from this clarity, wisdom arises. Decisions are made not out of fear or compulsion, but out of insight. Emotions pass without overwhelming you. Habits dissolve because the restless energy that fueled them has softened. The monkey may still swing from time to time, but it no longer rules the forest. So the next time your mind won't stop spinning, when you're lying awake replaying the day or caught in loops of what if, remember the glass of muddy water. You don't have to force clarity. You only have to stop stirring. Let the mind settle and peace will return on its own. In the end, peace isn't found in adding more to your life, but in learning to let go of what was never yours to hold. The Buddha taught that when the mind is free from clinging, it becomes light, clear, and unshakable. May this reminder stay with you long after this video ends, guiding you back to that quiet center whenever the noise of the world tries to pull you away. If this message touched something within you, stay with the journey. On your screen, you'll find another teaching waiting to meet you, one that might be the step you've been needing. Thank you for walking this path with me, for being part of Buddhist journey. Until we meet again, may you be well, may you be peaceful, and may you be free.